What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader, and I'm going to take a look today at some of the recent auctions that ended on ComicLink. This is kind of the first early auctions that I consider part of the November auction lot, but a lot of these ended at the end of October, going into November now for some of these other key issue books that have not ended yet. So I'll do a part 2 video maybe in a week or so. But in this video, I did pick some non-9.8 grades for a lot of Silver Age SpiderMan keys. I've got a Hulk 181 and a 9.6 that ended, and some of those are pretty tempting. I've actually got my eye on one right now that would not be a 9.8 that I'm trying to pick up either for myself or for my brother for Christmas. And just lots of really good stuff out there. And prices, again, were fairly soft. I don't think that there were any big surprises here. There was the Ultimate Fallout 4 Variant Edition that, again, came back down another rung in terms of price. So if you guys like these videos, let me know that, because it doesn't seem like many of you watch them. And that's okay. It's okay. I know it's got a small, devoted comic book fan base. But I just try to cover some of these key books, some 9.8s and some non-9.8s. So I want to start off with some Silver Age Amazing Spider-Man keys. Really cool books here. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 6 from 1963. This is the origin and first appearance of the Lizard. And I've thought about, at some point soon, putting together kind of a mid-grade, low-grade run of some of the different Spider-Man villains that are in these Silver Age keys. I don't think you can go wrong with those. There's always demand for Silver Age Spider-Man keys, even in low grade. So I think the prospect of reselling these is not going to be difficult. And given what prices have done, they've really come back down to earth a lot. Some of these in kind of the CGC-4 to CGC 8.0 range, there's some pretty interesting options out there. So I love this cover. Obviously, Lizard's a pretty famous villain. This one sold for $9.22 in an auction. It was a CGC 4.5 off-white pages. Likewise, here's the first appearance of Scorpion. I thought this was a pretty good deal. This is ASM 20 from 1965, another pretty cool cover. I just like kind of the Silver Age artwork on some of these, just really great. What's his name? Steve Ditko. He's a pretty renowned Silver Age artist here, and a lot of these are just absolutely stunning covers. But this was a 6.0 off-white to white pages. That one sold for $7.56. And, a lot of these are down like 30, 40, 50% versus the highs, and it makes them pretty tempting. Here was a 7.0 for the same book, recently graded. Much better shape, obviously. Pretty nice looking colors here. And that one was white pages, too. It's tough to find some of these Silver Age Spider-Man books in white pages. Most of them are going to be off-white or off-white to white at best. But this one did have white pages, and it sold for $10.26. So that one was a 7.0, this was a 6.0, and that one sold for about $250 more. So pretty interesting sales price there. Here's one I really would like to get. This is ASM 41. This is the first appearance of Rhino. Love this cover. Obviously a beautiful, pretty iconic cover. And we all know the Rhino at this point if you're a Spider-Man fan. This was an 8.0 off-white to white, and that one sold for $10.35. I thought that was a very fair deal. I've seen a few of them on eBay that I've actually bid on over the last month or so that were a little bit lower grades, and it's pretty interesting, the dichotomy between eBay and ComicLink. I think the type of buyer that uses ComicLink that are looking at these kind of books, they know that they come up pretty regularly, and it's not quite as much of a feeding frenzy as on eBay. eBay, you might be paying for an 8.0, $1,200, $1,300. Whereas on ComicLink, they're like, a lot of buyers are like, I see this every month. I don't care, and some of the prices tend to be a little bit more realistic, a little bit closer, if not below fair market value. But I thought that was a really good book, and it was very tempting. I almost bid on that one. That was, again, sold for $10.35. ASM 50, here's another one I'd probably like to get. It would have to be in a similar grade to this one. I don't think I can go much higher than this. Maybe a little higher, but not much. ASM 50, obviously, is the first appearance of Kingpin and the origin of Spider-Man retold. A pretty timeless cover from John Romita Sr. And, everyone knows this cover. It's been homaged to death. And this was a 6.5 off-white to white, and it sold at $10.10, which I thought was actually a really great deal. There was another one over on Heritage that was, I think, a 6.0 that ended up actually selling for higher than this one. That was also off-white to white. So, pretty good deal, I think, for some of these kind of timeless covers. I mean, to me, if I'm going to pick up any of these, it would probably be 41 with the first Rhino and then the first Kingpin, number 50. Both of those books in 4 or 5 6.0s, they're readily available, and they all kind of go around the same price, and they're really easy to resell in the event that I had to sell it for some reason. So we'll see. Maybe time will tell. Time will tell what happens next year with my collecting on comics, but some of these are awfully tempting. Here's another good one. This was ASM 129, and this is obviously the first appearance of the Punisher, white pages as well, slightly overwrapped, but give me a break. This is a pretty timeless book. And I think for me, if I'm going to get something like ASM 129, the very best it would be a 9.6, and even that's a stretch for my budget. So it would probably have to sell off some stuff, but a 9.8, it sets you back, $30,000 plus, right? I don't know what the exact number is, but it's a significant multiple of what they go for in a 9.6. So a 9.6 for this one and for 181, Hulk 181 would probably be just fine. I don't think I could afford a 9.6 though in a Hulk 181, but in a 9.6 for 129 is doable. It's doable. It's a lot of money, but it certainly could be done by selling off some different items here and there. I've certainly got plenty of inventory if I had to do it. But I thought that this price was pretty good, though. $73.55. There was one that just got listed that was also 9.6 white pages on Instagram. And Instagram, usually it should be less than ComicLink or eBay, definitely eBay, because you're doing it peer-to-peer. You're avoiding a lot of the eBay transaction fees, ComicLink, 3% buyer's premium, things like that. So keep in mind that $73.55 is before the 3% buyer's premium. It's before shipping costs. But there was one on Instagram listed recently that was a 9.6 white pages, and it was listed for about $7,700. But it was also make an offer. So I think if you got it around this price point of $73.55 or thereabouts, $7,500 for a 9.6, that's very reasonable and doable just based on some of the other data points outside of the big auction houses or eBay for a 9.6 for ASM 129. Pretty iconic book. ASM 300, this is kind of the next big one on my target list. I almost bid on this one, but this one really had a lot of feathering on the book. It was a 9.8, first appearance of Venom, direct edition. That sold for $3,100, and that seems to be the going rate on ComicLink. On eBay, I've seen as high recently, even very recently, as like $3,400, plus eBay sales taxes on top of that. There was another one that sold at $3,600, plus eBay sales taxes. So, you're getting closer to $4,000 or higher on eBay. So, to me, it makes sense to go for it on ComicLink or on some of the big Instagram houses like Grail's Comics or Elite Comics, but this one did have a lot of feathering. I zoomed in on the photos as I talked about in a recent video. You can see over here, there's just a lot of chipping going on the cover on the right-hand side for this book. It was freshly graded, and, it had perfect grader's notes, all that good stuff. But I don't know. I mean, to me, if I'm going to get this book, it's going to have to be as damn near perfect as I can get it. And this one was not the one. It just had some chipping going on in the upper right-hand corner. But nice book, still. $3,100, probably about fair market value. I would love for them to get down below $3,000. I think that's probably going to happen personally, just with the economy and things like that. We got the holidays coming up. Most people can't drop $3,000 on a comic book around the holidays. So, I'm keeping an eye out on Instagram. I'd prefer to pick it up on Instagram just to avoid transaction fees. But I have sold off a lot of stuff recently, and I'm ready and able and willing. I just got to find the right book. But this one sold for $3,100, and again, fair market value, but really zoom in on those photos because that one did have quite a bit of chipping going on in the right-hand side of the cover. Some other non-9.8s. I've got some early Batman books, Silver Age Batman. I got Batman 181, the first appearance of Poison Ivy. Not a comic, or not a cover I particularly like that much. I mean, I know it's iconic and all that stuff, but doesn't do it for me. It's not a book that really does it for me, but that one did sell for $4,400, and it was high grade. I mean, 8.5 off-white to white for a 66 book is high grade. I don't even want to think about what this would goes for at a 9.8, and there's probably not many of them out there anyway, but at least at an 8.5 off-white to white for $4,400, that shows you how expensive that book is. Here's one I would like to get, and it's very affordable, and it's a great cover. This is the first Silver Age appearance of the Scarecrow, Batman 189 from 1967. This one did have some defects, though, as the CGC label says, small pieces cut out, slightly affects the art. If I'm going to get one, I'm not going to get one that has anything cut out of it. But this one was a 6.0 off-white to white, but you know, that one sold for cheap because of the missing portions of pages. It sold for $350. To me, if I can get one of these in a 7.0, 8.0 for like, you know, under $1,000, that's a very desirable book and a great cover. And it really captures like the fear-based superpower of the Scarecrow. That's really what his kind of character abilities are, is just instilling fear. And obviously that was covered in the Christopher Nolan trilogy in the first movie, but great looking cover. I'd love to get one of those at some point. Here's the one I really want though, and this is Batman 227. It's not a first appearance or anything, but it's a pretty iconic book from Neil Adams. And it's obviously an homage to Detective Comics 31, which is a very, very early book and very expensive. But I've always loved this cover, and I've kind of fallen in love with it. But the problem on this book is that it's not dropping in price. Neil Adams obviously just passed away fairly recently, and this book has done nothing but go straight up in every single grade. There's been no slowdown in the price for this book in Batman 227 from 1970. If you look at every price chart, every grade, it's just crazy. Even despite the softening market, this book goes straight up. This one did have an overwrap. There was another one on Heritage I was looking at, same grade, that was off-white, I believe, also. I think that was a 7.0. That was a 7.0. But this one was an 8.0. It sold for $1,201. I was expecting $1,300 based on the FMV on Go Collect, so I thought $1,201 was very fair. But anyway, there's other grades out there. I was thinking about getting a lower grade example for my brother for his Christmas present. So we'll see if it happens. If I do end up getting it for him, I'll make sure to show it on the channel before I mail it off to him for his Christmas gift. But pretty great looking book, and definitely one I'd love to have at some point. Here's another one, 234, Batman 234. This is the first Silver Age appearance of Two-Face, and another great cover there. Kind of strange with the pirate ship or whatever, but still a pretty awesome cover. It's one I definitely would have. This was a 9.4 also. 9.4, off-white to white, CVA, exceptional. So a pretty amazing book. That one sold for $15.85, which I thought was a really good deal. That's a number I could live with personally. And to get it in a 9.4 from 1971, first Silver Age Two-Face, to me, I think that was a really good buy. Here's another one I'd love to get, and this is another Neil Adams cover, so unfortunately they're holding their price pretty well. That's Batman 251, a pretty famous Joker cover, and, you know, it's a totally classic cover, as it's labeled by CGC from 1973. You know, in a 9.8, it's well outside of my price point. It's, I don't know what the number is. I would say very expensive though. But this one was an 8.5, and it also had white pages, which made it attractive to me. So I thought about bidding on it. I was expecting it to go for about $1,000. It went for $1,130. And, you know, again, it's Neil Adams stuff right now is just jumping through the roof. There's been no slowdown in prices. The fact that it was also nicely centered and pretty freshly graded with a new label and white pages, I think all of those factors played in to why it went for, you know, about 10% higher than I expected. But really great book, though. I love that book. I mean, that is just an awesome, awesome cover. Next up is another one that's very doable in a 9.8, and that's the Joker #1 from 1975. This was a 9.8 old case, but this is the first solo comic book for the Joker. And it's got kind of a rogues gallery thing going on. You got Two-Face, you've got Catwoman, I guess that is. You got Riddler, Penguin, and it shows the Joker there. So this is an awesome book. And these come up pretty regularly, actually, in a 9.8. They're not that hard to find in a 9.8, but they are expensive. This one did sell for $13.79. FMV for a new case was more like $1,500–1,600. So, you know, this one went for a little bit of a discount relative to some of their other recent sales, but a really great book. And, you know, it's not cheap, but it's certainly doable in a 9.8 at $13.79. God knows I've spent more than that on other books. So, that's a cool book though. Next up was Hulk 181 in a 9.6, the first appearance of Wolverine, first full appearance. This is, you know, obviously a pretty timeless book, and this was a 9.6 white pages, and it sold for big money, $18,805. Pretty big number relative to the recent FMV. It kind of dipped down into the 16s recently in a 9.6. Obviously in a 9.8, you're talking many multiples of that, probably more like 70 would be my guess, 75. But in a 9.6, that's a lot of money, $18,000. I don't think I could afford a 9.6. I could probably afford a 9.0 though. So that's another book that's for a non-9.8 that I would definitely consider. And you're never going to go wrong with a Hulk 181. There's always going to be demand for it. And given the price peaks versus where they are now, to me, it seems like a really good investment to get Hulk 181 and just buy and hold it forever. No matter what the grade, a 4.0 or a 9.0. There's just always going to be demand for a Hulk 181. So that's another book on my short list. Probably not, definitely not in a 9.6 unless this, the gods collided and I was able to sell off a lot of stuff, but I don't know if I'd be willing to sell off as many items as it would take to land a 9.6. I'd be perfectly happy with like a 9.0 or an 8.5 even. But pretty interesting sale there. Next up, Marvel Spotlight number 28. This one is the first solo Moon Knight story from 1976. Beautiful brand new case with a custom label there for Moon Knight. It's a pretty awesome cover as well. That one sold for $19.55. That seems to be a little bit down relative to FMV on Go Collect. I think it was in the more like the 2,300 range before. So that was a good deal there if you're into Moon Knight. Great cover, though. I love that one a lot. Next up was a Star Wars 1 in a CGC-98. This one did have a little bit of an overwrap, which we've talked about on the channel. And it also did have a little bit of bleed through on the Star Wars logo, but it was a 9.8, freshly graded. And that one sold for $3,300, which I thought was a little higher, actually, than I was expecting. I was expecting kind of $3,100, $3,200. So it did go slightly higher. I did see a couple of other examples that have sold recently elsewhere, eBay or somewhere else, that were in the $3,700 range, that were brand new case styles and perfectly centered, things like that. But again, if you want a 9.8 for this book and you're willing to live with these quote-unquote defects of the wrapping or like the bleed through, then now's a good time. I mean, the prices have really come back down. Me personally, I wouldn't be surprised if they get down below 3,000. And I've seen a few examples sell on Instagram on some of those big auction groups, the Grails Comics or Elite Comics. They've sold a few in that $3,000 range. So I would not be surprised at all. In 6 months, this really very well could get down below 3,000. Ultimate Fallout 4, I've got the cover A, 2 of those, as well as the variant cover. Cover A, this one sold for $1,200. This one sold for $1,305. I've seen them as low as $1,200 on Instagram. So, that seems to be kind of the recent floor now. They were kind of $1,400, $1,500 in the last ComicLink auction. Now $1,200. And, Jerry over at Team CGC 9.8 on YouTube, he said, I wouldn't be surprised if they get down below 1,000. So I hope he's right. Because I'll definitely buy one at that point. But this one did have a custom case. Really nice example. So $1,200 or $1,300 for those two. The variant edition took another leg down relative to the one that sold last month on ComicLink. I don't remember the exact number it sold for, but it was in the $18,000, $19,000 range. This one sold for $16,550. So it continues to trend downward. A lot of other YouTubers view this one as one of the most overvalued comics relative to the standard cover A out there right now. And it'll be curious to see as this one drops. I mean, I was thinking 15,000 was certainly doable. It looks like that number might even be too high. I mean, does it hit 10,000? Who knows? But anyway, this one has taken another leg down. You got to remember, this was in the 30s less than a year ago, and now it's going for 16. So it's really come back down to earth, so to speak, for the variant edition of Ultimate Fallout 4, which is obviously the first appearance of Miles Morales. A couple more before we wrap things up. Wolverine Limited Series 1 in a direct edition. $565 is what that one sold for. That seems to be kind of the going rate, $500 to $575. Depending on the wrap, depending on how freshly graded it is, things like that. This one does get Newton rings really easily, too. That's something I see a lot, is Newton rings on this one. But this one was very clean. It looked really nice. Pretty iconic Frank Miller cover. $565. And again, you might be able to get lucky and get that even below $500 if you're patient on that one. And then finally, NYX number 3, first appearance of Laura Kinney, X-23. Modern book, but a pretty cool one. This one's hovering right around $1,100, or it had been. This one sold for $1,000. So this one's taken another leg, 10% leg down or so in price. And it makes sense. It's a modern book. It's a speculative book. Not much has really happened with this character. It's basically a female Wolverine, but pretty awesome cover, though. And, a fairly relatively low 9.8 ratio for a modern book, but very cool book. And, there's still auctions going right now on ComicLink, so I'm sure I'll do a kind of follow-up video with some of the other 9.8s and others. other comics that I've either bid on or am tracking maybe in a week or so. But I just wanted to show you some of the early returns from what I consider to be the November ComicLink auction results. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.